Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
When people talk about the right to reproductive decisions, aren't they forgetting someone? The conversation continues today.
Here are my big questions. How do you defeat something like this? You know, if it's a spiritual battle, and you know I'm a faith person, you resist the devil and he flees. In fact, that was my Bible study just the other day. If it's about civics, it's about not giving your consent. So one, I think in this case is awareness, get everyone to read it, and then get those in Ohio out to vote. All right, I'm not in Ohio. What else can I do?
Well, that's the right question. So we got an email recently because a lot of our friends are on a lot of different people's mailing lists, and we got a email came in from someone who was being recruited for a donation for the Democratic Party, and they live in Michigan. And the email came in from the chairman of the state Democratic Party in Ohio. They wrote this person and said, "Dear so-and-so, I've been given permission by your state Democrat Party to ask you to support our work in Ohio to pass this amendment. And in fact, your party in Michigan has agreed that whatever you give, we'll split 50-50. And you'll be helping us because this issue is so important to your state, to all states, to the entire country. Whatever it takes, Democrats around the country are going to support this because it's the most important issue that's out there." Now, Michael, you and I both know political parties and organizations don't share with
money.
others.
No.
They don't share money. This is how serious they are for this being, in essence, their national strategy to deconstruct the concept of the protection of life in the republic. But it goes bigger than that. They're saying with paper and pencil or paper and pen, we can create a civil right all by ourselves. Our declaration says our rights come from God. These people say, we got a better idea. We'll make one up because it fits our issues, our concerns, and our industry.
The unalienable right comes from Planned Parenthood.
Now,
they literally become like a branch of government if this passes.
They literally are canceling the Declaration of Independence itself.
With a blank check for chaos, unintended consequences, and death. And I mean, we went through a couple of these paragraphs. I love when it starts getting in because it really gives a protective. We just lived through COVID, right? Come on, you think we'd wake up to this. But now an abortionist will be a protected entity. No matter what they do and whatever goes wrong, they'll be protected.
So will Big Pharma.
Big Pharma will be protected. As we often say, and we haven't yet in our conversation today, but nowhere is there any right to the man, the father. They don't mention woman, but they also don't mention man. So I can assure you, grandparents, who are out there have no idea their grandchild could be aborted and their son won't have any say, nor will they, nor is there parental consent, informed consent. And then it gets to the state shall not directly or indirectly burden, penalize, prohibit, interfere with, or discriminate against either the individual, their voluntary exercise of this right to take a life, and the person or entity who assists in taking the life, unless the state demonstrates that it is using the least restrictive means to advance the individual's health in accordance with widely accepted and evidence-based standards of care. What is that?
And this is constitutional language. Okay, this is so filled.
I mean, is mental health in there while we're at it?
It's so filled with lawyering weasel words. But once again, no matter what happens in this case, the final decision is with the abortionist. Whether the question is whether the fetus is viable or not, whether the unborn child is considered viable or not, that's decided by the abortionist,
who has a monetary gain in carrying out the procedure.
Well, get this one. Here's the definition of fetal viability. One of the very few terms that's defined in this amendment. Fetal viability means the point in a pregnancy when, in the professional judgment of the pregnant patient's treating physician, that's the abortionist.
Right.
The fetus has a significant likelihood of survival outside the uterus with reasonable measures. With reasonable measures, Michael, would they have considered your two daughters being born and all that they went through as reasonable measures?
Probably not, seeing as they were at that time thought to be monoamniotic, which would be at least a 90-day NICU stay. I love it because I know you went to Catholic school. They refer to it as a fetus, which means offspring, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But, not unborn child by any means.
Of course. So there's the term again, and in the constitutional language. Why not? Did you never mention? You know what else they never do here, Michael?
Life of the mother.
They never. Well, the life of the mother is determined solely by the abortionist. That's the abortionist has all the power.
I don't recall ever reading the words life of the mother or
No.
Incest.
None of those issues are in there whatsoever because now you have a human right. It's nobody's business.
I can do whatever I want.
None of those questions right there because there's no protection because they're not recognizing that there's another body involved. There's another human body involved. A human body that inevitably will become, in almost every instance, a healthy born child. Now, we understand that there are other issues and other questions here, and that's why you want statutory resolution. That's why the way to solve this problem is to not do something stupid like this. And this is, in fact, it's not kind of stupid to call this stupid. This is beyond anything we have ever seen. It is the worst.
David, I got to interrupt and say, this is evil.
This is the worst attempt at constitutional legal construction that any of us have ever seen. Michael, I've been debating behind closed doors the question of Roe versus Wade for 43 years. I've had closed door debates with very significant lawyers who were pro-abortion. And in every instance at the end of the debate, they all agreed Roe was wrongly decided, it's lousy law, and it never should have been done. It should have been resolved in a different fashion altogether. This is an attempt to bring Roe versus Wade back through a whole nother nightmare scenario and to create the right that doesn't exist in the federal constitution. Guess what? It doesn't exist in any state constitution either. That's why they're trying to put it in a state like Ohio, a bellwether state, and say, now Ohioans have the right none of the rest of you have. I mean, look, their strategy is brilliant if you get points for being just fundamentally evil. This is brilliant stuff. This is like screw tape letters right here.
In 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court made a mistake. They decided a child in the womb was not a person and not endowed with the right to life. Since that day, America has walked in the shadows of death. Even now, after the final overturning of Roe v. Wade, the shadows threaten to grow longer. In the 1980s, Phil Keaggy released a song titled Little Ones, hoping to awaken America to the light of life. Miles apart and years away from meeting, Michael and David both heard that song. Both heard the cry of the unborn, and both prayed that God would show them a way to speak out for life. Please follow the link in this episode's description to hear Phil Keaggy's song, Little Ones.
Yeah, we just went through all this for the 4th, thinking about inalienable rights, thinking about endowed by our Creator. It's something that is pre-existing to man. It doesn't come from man. It already existed. And then the unalienable, untouchable rights, which, by the way, the fetus or offspring or unborn child has these same rights because they come from the Creator, not the backseat of a convertible. And this is making abortion a self-evident truth, an unalienable right to take a life endowed by Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
We've come a long way from 1776, David Zanotti. And let me tell you something, none of these screw tape letter or crazy books that we read in high school 50 years ago, including 1984, can put a patch. I always say the only left shocking in life is the truth. And the truth is Ohio's a battleground. And this is a blank check for death, empowering Planned Parenthood like a branch of government. And guess what? You and I can both go to bed tonight and give them a 50-50 chance of pulling it off. And you know that.
Well, and you mentioned something earlier that's incredibly important. People would expect that at an end of a conversation like this, I might have answered you earlier and said, well, right now, the most important need is we need money in the state of Ohio to fight this. Well, yeah, there's a financial need for communications. There's no doubt about that. But I will tell you, money alone will not stop this. This is the sort of thing that people have to approach from a platform of conscience and goodwill. I've been talking to people who are not pro-life, who do not identify with the pro-life movement. I've shared this language with them, and the notes that we wrote up, we marked it up like it was a piece of legislation. We marked it up the way they do it in the Capitol. And we wrote it up, and they've looked at this, and they have said, I'm not with you in your philosophy in regards to the question of pro-life. But you don't have to be pro-life to reject this. This is just really awful law. This is terrible. You can't do this. This is just, there's no solution. This is ridiculous. Now, again, we can win this debate with one arm tied behind our back and an eye patch on. This isn't tough to win because it's so stupid. But the most important thing people can do is call somebody they know in Ohio. I don't care whether it's a customer, whether it's a client, whether it's a relative, whether it's a former pastor or a church people went to, or anybody in Ohio, call them. Ask them. People don't understand. When we studied the entire Obama strategy in 2008 and 2012, the most important thing they did after they spent $4 billion was to try to get one person talking to another person to get them to go vote. That was their bottom line. You got to send somebody to the door to say, make sure you vote. Well, maybe you don't have to send to the door. Maybe you can write him. Maybe you can call him. You can email him. You can do whatever you want on social media. But we need a national rallying cry to be able to combat the glitterati, the Planned Parenthood International conspiracy in plain sight. And we've got to get people out to vote.
Not to be dramatic, but I mean, this literally, and I don't do it very often. I mean, I'm not being pious here. It's one of the most memorable handful of times. I read this amendment, I immediately went into prayer and fasting. I did. And I don't do that very often, very rarely. I think of things like this because I know there are simultaneous wars. By the way, there is a holy war that isn't over yet. It may be in remission for a little while. They got Afghanistan back, Pakistan, but trust me, it'll relaunch. But there is a cultural war and there's an economic war. We know how the economic war is going, socialism versus capitalism, self-governed versus controlled. But there's also a cultural war. Usually in these type of cultural war things, the two biggest apparatuses of opposition is the church itself. But like I told you, when I'm from Louisiana, so when people love to have debates, what was the worst hurricane? Was it Betsy? Was it Katrina? Was it Camille? And of course, the problem is the infrastructure is weaker and weaker for each of these storms, even more so. I'll put Camille against any storm that ever existed in human history. Camille in 2005 would have been far more devastating than Katrina. Now, that's a debate for meteorologists. But what I'm saying is we usually come to these things. Talk radio couldn't be in a worse place than it is right now. The church couldn't be in a more ineffective place than it is right now, although I think it's on the verge of a reawakening, and culture's on the verge of a revival, but it hasn't quite birthed yet. So these two big opposition forces, what role do you think talk radio and the church is going to play in this, and how important will it be? And is it up to the task?
Wow.
That's why, like every Italian, I'm praying, I'm exercising belief that life has already triumphed over death, that truth has already triumphed over lies, that the enemy is defeated and we can simply resist him and he will flee. In this case, resist him. Our founding fathers gave us the ability to not consent to this. We can influence our friends on all of our social media or in our phone by texting. I would actually add to that, pray and fast. But I'm telling you, I'm also Italian. I'll go to bed and worry because I'm still haunted by that Phil Keaggy song, Who Will Speak Up for the Little Ones? And I can speak up, but do those out there have ears to hear and the hearts to act? Because my guess is the state of the church, the state of talk radio, the state of the American voter, especially the right, doesn't have me feeling very confident.
No, and I will tell you that even if all those things were incredibly healthy and vibrant right now, this would be a massive battle because of the construct of intentionally placing it in an off election year where it is so difficult to communicate with people and to help them understand the urgency of this importance of this. Let me answer with another illustration from history. Since I took this job in 1985, I've been studying the period of 1850 and up to the 10 years of the Civil War. Once I started to study the Civil War, I couldn't really get off of the big battles. They're so intriguing and fascinating and instructional and tragic. The tragedy, there's nothing about the Civil War that isn't draped and clothed in tragedy. You cannot find a redemptive reality out of the Civil War that doesn't come with a tragic price tag. Now, let's just get this right out there. This battle in Ohio in 2023 is Gettysburg. This is the battle that would determine the outcome of the war. If this kind of an amendment can be passed in a state like Ohio in an off-off election year, the other side on this will use this victory as the catapult for every other victory. We will never in our lifetimes stop hearing about this moment. Now, it is that important. There are decisive battles that change the place of history. This is one of those battles. I don't know how else to be more candid. A person doesn't even have to be pro-life to say this is a stupid idea and horrible timing. And whatever could be gained in a way far more intelligently if they felt it was gain. You see what I'm saying? You don't even have to be pro-life to reject this, but you've got to vote to reject it. And there's the challenge.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.